So in the 20th century, this big thing evolved, the South Florida water system. It is really unbelievable what's happened in this relatively short time, right? So a little over 100 years ago, maybe a couple 100,000, maybe 100,000 people lived in the watershed. It was basically uncolonized area. And the reason that lots and lots of people didn't live here was that there was lots of water. That is, we got a lot of rainfall, and most of the area was wet for most of the year. So the people that did live here lived on the coast and accessed the resources from the coast. But a little over 100 years ago, a governor was elected in Florida on the plank of draining the Everglades in order to make that area available for the family farmer. And he had the inauspicious name of Napoleon Bonaparte Broward. And he won. And after a flood in 1903, started this project that's evolved to what we see today, that supplies water and to 7 or 8 million people. Unbelievable. So the real question, one of the things that motivated me in this study, is this model of how these unexpected variations in climate and changes in social values intersect to dramatically transform the system. That is, and the question was whether the current drought, which is real and everyone experiences a lot more than I do. I'm an academic, I study things from a distance. But is that such an opportunity? Because in the past, certainly in 1971, when instead of getting an average of about yay much water rainfall during a year, you got about that much water. And it prompted the governor to bring together a set of people, a shirt sleeve symposium, and created these things called the water management districts, right? So change happens in these sort of unexpected ways. What I'd like to do is to review a little bit about what the system is now, how it works, and how people are using the water, and then talk a little bit about these scenarios, which is really the method we use in this study of trying to think way into the future, 20 or 30 years. What would the world down here look like? And these scenarios are really powerful tools for sort of escaping the present, the trap of the present, and thinking out ahead. And we've seen this many times in the past as well. So for example, in 1947, when instead of getting that much rain, you received, about as much as the height of the ceiling, everything was flooded. My dad talks about having to go to work in a boat. He worked at one of the power plants in Fort Lauderdale. And the plan that came into effect, the Central and Southern Florida Flood Control Plan that was adopted by Congress, really was envisioned a decade or so before that by a group of soil scientists who had been working on these environmental issues and how we would fix things like soil degradation and water supply and stuff. So here was this set of ideas that had been sitting on the shelf for a number of years, and then all of a sudden at the flood came the opportunity to implement those ideas. So Florida's a really unique place, right? And most of the latitudes around the world that Florida sits at, one finds deserts, right, because of global circulation patterns with Hadley cells and such. But because Florida's a peninsula, you're blessed with an abundant amount of rainfall during the summer months. Right? So all those little water molecules that were floating happily in the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico a few days ago get evaporated and sucked in over the peninsula and then appear as rainfall to you. So it's part of this big kind of mesoscale process that scientists in the 70s, Art Marshall was one of them, who call this magnificent thing the rain machine that helped to bring lots and lots of water to this otherwise really dry area. Now, there's sort of two patterns that I'd like to identify in terms of the major source of water here, which is rainfall. Right? And one is this distinct annual cycle. You get 85% of your rain during the wet summer months. Everybody who lives here knows that. You have a wet season and a dry season. Okay? During the fall and winter, rainfall really only happens when you happen to get those nasty fronts that come down and move through the system and deliver a little bit of water. But that rain machine kicks in, in another month or two and starts dumping lots and lots of water during the summertime. So this annual pattern of wet season and dry season is really what structures a lot of the design and management and decision criteria that are used to manipulate water in that big complex system. It's really designed around this annual pattern, if you will, of rainfall, of getting rid of too much water in the summertime and then trying to hold water for the dry winter and spring months. But some of the work that I've done shows that there really are these other patterns as well that exist over much, much longer time frames than an annual cycle. In that, there seems to be about a 5 to 10 year flood and drought cycle that we think is linked in some part to global circulation patterns, things like ENSO, El Nino, Southern Oscillation. So one of the keys in trying to think about how to deal with these flood and drought cycles is to think on the long term. That is, to think outside an annual basis and how you prepare for these inevitable floods and these inevitable droughts that are going to occur. So this is, I think, key to this sort of strategic thinking ahead. Lake Okeechobee, as some people have described it, the sort of water heart of South Florida. It certainly is the key part of the water management system, one of the big storage areas. And a time course of stage and the amount of water that gets stored in there. And you can see most recently how it's on one of those down cycles as well. One of the things we did was try to dig up some data by previous studies on who uses water, and this is just data from Palm Beach and Martin County. And as you can see, the big consumer of water is agriculture. No surprise to anybody who lives here, on the order of about, I think it's 2/3 or so of the sort of annual allotment ends up being used by agriculture. Public water supply is roughly a little less than 30%. And a kind of ballpark figure to keep in your mind is the two counties use on the order of about 1 million gallons of water a day. So it's a lot of water that gets moved through it. But you can see recreational purposes, which include things like golf courses and such, are not very big. Neither are commercial or power generating needs as all. So this introduced the notion that one of the big one of the big factors that we needed to look at in terms of thinking more broadly into the future is how land uses are going to change or likely to change in the near future. And for those of you who live down here, you live with this on a daily basis about how whether governments are purchasing big chunks of land and all sorts of things that go on at different scales about that land use. But that's another one of the kind of, I think, messages of this, that it's not easy to extract these things or separate these approaches to how people use the land from things like water supply. We kind of did some crude water budgets, just like we all do on our monthly dollar budgets. Where's the money coming in, how much is coming in, how much is going out. And water budgets are pretty much the same kind of approach to it in terms of looking at, again, mostly this part of the world, not down south, but including Lake Okeechobee and Palm Beach and Martin County. An average year at the top, and all of these are values in million acre feet in terms of storage and uses and stuff. So you can see dry years like 2000 and the one that's happening over the last couple of years. There's just not a lot of water to be divvied up among these sort of competing straws, if you will, on it. So we thought about three major factors, as I said, that we think will influence how what the opportunities are for water use supply in the future, right? things like land use, population, and of course the big climate change, which is already upon us. So most of the planning documents that you see will try and forecast these factors based upon existing trends. That's what's happened in the past, will continue to happen in the future, right? So a lot of the planning that goes on really speculates that, well, it might slow down a little bit, but you can see that certainly Palm Beach County is in this sort of exponential growth phase. It may be slowing down a little bit, but it's continued to rise. But in doing this, we thought, well, what are the conditions under which the population of Palm Beach County would decrease? So it's important to think about these alternative kinds of futures. Now, one of the things that's coming out of a growing body of literature about climate change is this idea that's sort of captured into phrase that